Hi guys, as always, I'm Al, this is the Geek in Review, and we're going to be talking about Star Trek PICARD Season 3, Episode 6. I'm going to do some non-spoiler stuff, as always, before I get into it, so let's get to it. So we're past the halfway point, and despite being a bit of a slower paced episode this week, we get a lot, and I mean a lot of a lot. All the TNG crew are nearly back together, we get some old faces and old ships as well, and a lot of both of them. And this isn't an episode where they do a lot of things, but more where they work out what they've got to do next. And this episode is essentially all about family at its core, literal family members, and the crew family dynamic as well. No one mentions how Raffi fits into that, by the way, and it's probably best not to think about that. I'll get to it later on in the video. And this episode is a little bit of a breather. We get a few fan questions answered about the lore and data thing, a big new WTF question at the end, but beyond that, there's still a lot to get through here with what's going on with Jack and how does he fit into all this. There's also some great Riker and Worf stuff, and Riker even comments that Worf isn't as fun as he used to be, so I'm glad he agrees with me on that one. And it's all starting to tie up now with the storylines together, but this episode does land a huge, great big question at the end. And also, did I mention all the old faces and starships? But anyway. But before we get into it, I just want to say thanks for taking the time to choose to watch this video today. I really appreciate it, and I'd appreciate it even more if you leave a like on it and subscribe to the channel as well. But anyway, let's get into it. So no flashback opener this week, which I was kind of surprised about. I was expecting that, to be honest. That's not necessarily a bad thing. And it opens where we left off last week with the Titan on the run and the several ships, Starfleet and Vadic, looking for them. And the amount of ships that's after them, look, yeah, you get a sense of how big the changeling infiltration must be in Starfleet here. And after 3 weeks of not much to say, Vadic's back to being dramatic, and it seems that all our crew are shapeshifters. Which, yeah, I had a few questions about, and they've kind of answered it, I suppose. She talks to them about peace and unity, so I assume that she means the Great Link, and then kills a member of her crew that questions her, so not really on the whole peace and unity vibe. And again, that's a definite change to the changelings' behaviour, because they were all like, changelings don't kill another in Deep Space Nine. They even punished Odo for that. So yeah, I hope they explain that going forward, but that's about as much Vadic as we get. She's only at the start and the end of this. But she comes up with a plan to go after Picard's associates, so she's on the hunt for someone. And then back on the Titan we pick up where Jack left off last week, and Beverly's found out that he's got the same disease as Picard, Eromotic syndrome. So he's inherited it from his dad, and yeah, it was only brought up in All Good Things, the last episode of TNG, and they're sort of using this to explain away Jack's visions and behaviour. But yeah, I never seen Picard with the glowing red eyes or doing the Jason Bourne thing, because I would have noticed that. I think people would have brought that up. But Picard feels guilty that he's got himself to blame, and Jack's back at the 10 forward bar because they've got to keep going there because they spent all the money on sets for the TNG cast. Let's be honest, it'll probably pop back up last week. Jack's on a bit of a spiral with the news, and Picard's got a bit more of a chirpier outlook. Raffi and Worf join the gang on board the Titan, so no more of Metalis Prime, although I bet they find a way to take us back there. But great reunion when they got on board with Worf and Crusher, and they even noticed the change in him. Raffi and Seven, not so much of a great reunion, and we don't really get a sense of how Raffi's going to fit into the TNG Titan crew dynamic, at least yet. And for those that didn't watch Deep Space Nine, Worf gives an expo dump on the Dominion and Starfleet and the Founder's Plague and everything like that. But he doesn't give us any new information, and by that I mean he doesn't tell us anything that we don't already know if we haven't watched Deep Space Nine. What happened to the Founders after the war? What happened to the Dominion, the Jem'Hadar, the Vorta? I mentioned in a previous video that I think Star Trek's sort of afraid to fill in those blanks, and I hope they do, because I think the fans deserve it after 20-25 year wait of not knowing what went on. But yeah, Trek is really afraid to touch this with Deep Space Nine, so it'll be interesting to see how they handle it going forward. But anyway, they've got to do the Ocean's 11 plot to access the Daystrom's Institute data. Quite literally, I'll get to that in a moment. And remember, it has got an AI security system, because that's going to be very important. And yeah, as soon as I mentioned the AI element last week, I was like, it's lore. I bet it's lore. They keep bringing it up. It's got to be lore. And this does get cleared up here a little bit. But before that, Riker, Raffi and Worf are on the away team. And when they beamed onto the Daystrom Institute station, that was definitely Data's voice, right? On the computer. Did you hear that? Or was it Lore's? Anyway. So, before they can do what they're planning to do, Starfleet show up and they go after the Titan, so they need to leave the away team. And it does happen later on in the episode, but at the time I've got a note saying, doesn't Starfleet think to check that no one's on board the Daystrom Institute? They do go back to it later on in the episode, but it took a while, that's all I'm saying. And while they're on board Daystrom, we get a lot of nods and Easter eggs here. Section 31, Tribbles, I mean this is their dark sort of Frankenstein vault. But I don't get why Section 31 would have a Tribble, is it weaponised? And then they encounter the AI, sort of, I'm going to be saying that a lot in this episode. And it's Moriarty, so yeah, that's how he fits in. It's been driving people mad since the trailers, but he's part of the AI that runs the Daystrom Institute. And who thought it was a good idea to let this guy out? But anyway. So the whole thing feels like a sort of haunted house routine, but with a huge twist, because Moriarty's sort of chasing them down and taunting them, and he says he's got this song in his head, and Riker recognises it, not straight away, but he gets there. Because the song that he's remembering is Pop Goes the Weasel, and that's the one that Data was whistling when he first met Riker at Encounter in Farpoint. So they use this to turn Moriarty off, and they discover that the AI is actually an amalgamation of, well, a lot of things. Soongs, Data, B4, lore, it's all in there in this one body. But although the body's complete, the mind isn't really working, so he's not operational when they first meet him. And we know we're going to get lore, they teased it in the trailer, but yeah, we get a little bit of Data in this episode as well. It's sort of a Data copy, if you will. That was terrible, but come on, like and subscribe. And we get a message for Alton soon, so yeah, we're getting a live soon, or at least, you know, a living soon. And God, the Star Trek Picard love throwing a soon at us. But this is just to explain why the body exists and why it was created. And with this is going to make a lot of fans happy and a lot of fans not happy. They're bringing Data back. And I'll be honest, I thought they would. I didn't expect them to do some sort of AI version or version of Data that didn't have a physical presence. And this is where it's probably going to make some fans very happy and some fans very pissed off. I had an idea that they would bring Data back sort of in a way like this. I thought that he would just be an AI, so he'd just be essentially a mind without a physical presence. I didn't expect him to do the opposite road and cram 3 personalities or more into the one body. Because it's not Data, it's not lore, it's not Soon, it's not B4, it's kind of multiple personalities, but again, kind of not really. And yeah, I don't know how I feel about that, because even Picard mentions this, that they've watched Data die twice. So bringing him back for a third time kind of makes it seem that he's immortal, and also, are they going to kill him off again? I'm not sure that they could actually do that and get away with it. But yeah, I really want to know how you feel about this with Data coming back. We knew that lore was happening, so there was a good chance, but a bit of a twist that they kept hidden, and I think it's probably the biggest one so far. I think it's even bigger than the Ro Laren one. But anyway, back on the Titan, they've escaped Starfleet and hid out at the Fleet Museum. Finally, we knew this was coming. Terry Matalas has been teasing it for weeks, and it looks great. And I've got a really good theory about this museum, and I've been saying it since it came up, and I'll get more into it in a second. But they're not just at the Fleet Museum to hide out, they're there for help with Geordi, and he's not best pleased to see his old captain. It's Commodore LaForge now, and he comes on board with his other daughter. And I think the reintroduction of Geordi might be my favourite one so far. But yeah, my theory for the Fleet Museum, because they drop so many Easter eggs of big and famous ships here, is in the last episode, they're somehow going to get their hands back on the portal weapon and they're going to use that to portal in all these old ships that we see. But what old ships do we see that are going to show up in the final battle? Well, we get Defiant from Deep Space Nine. We get Voyager, of course, that 7 of 9 has got a great moment with. We get Kirk's Constitution A-Class. And the one that surprises everyone, which might be the most shocking reveal of the season, is the bounty bird of prey that gives this episode its name. So yeah, some huge ships here, some that I expected to see, but even seeing them, it was still weird and it gave me kind of tingles where I was like, oh, they're definitely going to use them later on, they're not just showing you them. And the bit when we see Voyager and Seven gives the backstory, that is probably the best acting that Seven's had to do this season. And she finally gets a really good, deep, decent scene here with Jack Crusher, and I really enjoyed it. But yeah, seeing all those ships, I love ships, so that's just totally my thing. Let me know what you think. What was your favourite ship in the Fleet Museum scene? Let me know in the comments below. But going back to the family thing that I mentioned at the start of the episode, I know I went into the Easter eggs and all that stuff, but yeah, this is especially concerning the LaForge family, because Sydney's the one in between here with her literal family being on board, but then her wanting to side with the crew family side of it. And Geordi doesn't want his daughter in danger and wants Sydney off the ship, and obviously that's not something that she's really prepared to do. And he's really challenging Picard on putting his daughter in danger here, which, yeah, I like this development of Geordi because he is a dad now, so he's going to see Starfleet and the adventures and things a little bit more differently when he's got something to lose. And speaking of families, the LaForge kids and the Picard kid work together to steal the cloaking device from the bounty so the Titan can use it and give them an advantage. And it still seems that cloaks are illegal in the Federation despite the whole Romulan alliance not really existing anymore. And yeah, this was a good twist. It sort of plays into what we've known about Jack, that he's a bit of a rogue and he's not afraid to steal anything. And although he's breaking the law, he's not really hurting anyone, let's be honest about that. But the cloak isn't really working that well, and who better to fix it than the greatest engineer in Starfleet, Geordi LaForge. So they've got what they need to go back and get Riker, Worf and the gang. And we get a great CGI sequence here and a great gunfight sequence in the corridor while Riker's trying to defend Worf and Raffi while they get away. And while the Titan gets away, Riker doesn't. He gets hit and goes down. So, you know, we've seen scenes of this where he's been captured already and we kind of know where it's going. I just kind of wish they gave the rest of them a little bit more to do. So yeah, they managed to beam them all off Daystrom Institute apart from Riker, so they've got Worf, Raffi and sort of Data back on board. And they've lost Riker, at least for now, because you know they're going to come back for that. And they reboot the new Data body, and they explain that it does age like a human, like Picard's synthetic body, but with a few personalities, they don't really know what they're going to get when they turn them on. And I'll be honest, I've not really noticed the absence of Data this season. Maybe it's because they hammered them so much in season 1, I just kind of switched off. But when Brent Spiner starts doing the Data accent again, I mean, I know he looks older, but that sent a few chills down my spine. It was completely worth it. And of course, they've taken him because they need to find out what else the changelings have stolen from the Daystrom Institute that's more deadly than the portal weapon. And Data starts to switch personalities. Mostly he's Data, but then he's Lore for a bit, and then he's B4, and then he's a Sun. Which Sun, Alton, could have been any of them. There's hundreds of them. Don't worry about it. And this is where the episode really gets interesting, because I'm not sure where this is going to go. Data reveals, or, you know, what we're going to call this guy, Data Lore B4, because it's not Data, is it? We need to come up with a new name. Let me know in the comments below what you're going to call this guy. But anyway, Data reveals that the thing that was stolen from the Daystrom Institute was actually Picard's body, because again, remember he died in season 1, and this is a synthetic one, the same kind of body that the new Data's in. But yeah, that was a big one, so what are the changelings doing, or what do they need with Picard's body? Because they said it was more deadly than the portal weapon, and that was pretty deadly. And this has to be tied to Jack, right? I mean, it can't not be tied to Jack. I'm not really sure what to make of this ending. I've got a few ideas. I think that this new version of the changelings were maybe created by Starfleet when they were experimenting on how to mix changeling and human DNA. Why they would need Picard for that, I'm not entirely sure. This is going to lead to a lot of fan theories online, and I want to know what you guys think. What are the founders doing, or what do they need with Picard's body? Let me know in the comments below. And then it cuts back to Riker, and we find out that he's been captured by Vadic, and she's got Troy already, because remember, at the start of this episode, she said that she was going to hunt down Picard's associates, and I bet you'd forgotten about Troy if you haven't seen this episode, hadn't you? That's okay, so had I. And that's pretty much where the episode ends. So we've now got all the TNG cast members back and nearly together. Obviously saving Riker and Troy